Hello, everyone. I have the pleasure of having Dana Palladino on my podcast today. She is the owner of Dental Hygiene Basics podcast, which really helps students navigate how to get into dental hygiene school, how to be successful in dental hygiene school. So I would definitely say that Dana is in my tribe of people that really want to see you be successful. So I had to have Dana on my podcast because she just has so many great words of wisdom. And I know when you hear her voice, you will recognize it. And if you haven't subscribed to her Dental Hygiene Basics podcast as of yet, then I encourage you to do so. If you're already enrolled in school, Dana still just puts out so much good content that will help you navigate the challenges and the rigors of dental hygiene school. So today, though, we're talking about something that's really near and dear to my heart, and I know Dana's as well. Dana has published an article, and I will let her share with you. I'd also like Dana to share like her journey, how she got into doing this with students and developed all of this great content. So, Dana, I'm so happy to have you here. Welcome to the podcast.
Yes, thank you so much, Billy. It's an honor to be here. Ever since we first met, when you came on my podcast, I knew that we were going to be fast friends. And I could tell that, like you said, our passions, they definitely run the same course. We definitely have this fire inside of us to help students become dental hygienists. And so I feel very blessed to have met you and to be here today. A little bit about my journey, I kind of went the long route to become a hygienist. It was like by the time I realized I wanted to be a hygienist, I was 19, which doesn't seem old, right? But then by the time I actually got into dental hygiene school, I was 25. So there was a lot of ups and downs, windy, twisty roads along that journey. And when I got into dental hygiene school, that's when I realized, oh, you could be a teacher of dental hygiene. I realized I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I knew that I was supposed to end up at this school doing this, this career path. And I knew that I was going to become a teacher. So flash forward. Is that how you say it? Yeah, fast forward. Fast forward. And I graduated. I immediately started my master's. I mean, like I graduated in May of 2015. I started my master's in, I think, September, August in the fall. And I just hustled through it, got done. I got my 5 years of work experience that they told me I needed to become an educator. And then it was like, boom, okay, I left clinical, I went into education, and I really haven't looked back. There's been a lot of ups and downs in my journey as an educator in formal education. And there came a point in my life where I was kind of looking at this crossroads because my husband's job was moving us to another city, and I'm looking at it like, what am I going to do now? I love education, but I kind of feel restricted in what I'm doing in the formal education space. Like, is that where I want to continue my journey? And I kept thinking that one day I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I kept thinking, what am I going to do? Like, how do I take the skills that I have and do that on my own? And so one day I was just reflecting, thinking, and it just came to me like all of a sudden. And I realized that I would say all of a sudden, I think it had been building because I have these very major milestones in my educational career. And they were moments where I had a student that failed out or had to leave the program for a reason. And those moments, they just were always there with me. And so every year when it was like, I'm starting a new school year, I was always trying to get back to square one. How do I help them succeed? And sometimes it was beyond my control. It was maybe financial that was an issue. It was maybe mental. It was anxiety, test anxiety. There were so many other components that were just outside of the what we were teaching them. They were having a hard time with everything that's going on in dental hygiene school. So it was like it clicked one day. I realized I need to go back a step further. I've been starting at the beginning of the semester. How do I get students ready for the first day of the semester? And that's really where Dental Hygiene Basics was born. So the podcast went from there. Now I have a free online course. It's called Dental Hygiene Basic Training. It's to help students prepare for those first few weeks of dental hygiene school. And then when I'm not doing that, I'm tutoring. So I'm a busy gal, but that kind of wraps up all of my passions, except the one little side passion, which is personal finance, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. And to just kind of further align just how how parallel you and I are. And when you put people together, it's amazing. One plus one sometimes doesn't equal two. You can be really exponential in your impact. And for me, I have the same kind of inside charge is when I was a student in dental hygiene school, at the very end of the second semester, we lost 7 of the students in my cohort, and that kind of shook me to my core. And it wasn't until I reflected that I recognized that teaching was in my future and that I wanted to make a difference. And it's become my mantra, like you, that if you can get into hygiene school after Dana helps you, I want to help you get all the way to the finish line through dental hygiene school. And what's so awesome about our network now is that we have people like you who are navigating the waters of getting in and being successful and really setting yourself up for success. And then people like myself. And then there's so many others that kind of take the baton once the student graduates and says, okay, now let me help you navigate when you get out there. It's so great.
Yes, I love that because I know our passion are the students, right? And
Yes.
my passion was always very much and still is that early phase. I always worked with the brand new students, their first days of school were always with me. And that's my passion is like getting you through that first semester. It was like that is my favorite semester. And so I feel like it's perfect for for me to slowly pass them on to you. You're like, look, you've got in now. Now you need to just put your head down, do the work, have the support that you need and get through it. And then I love what you said about passing the baton because the after graduation stuff, I have so many tips for after graduation, but it's not my truest passion. My truest passion is like, how do we get you into school and through school?
Absolutely. And that's right where I am too. There's so many, I could give advice on that, once you graduate, how to thrive in the op, like Amber Auger says.
Yes.
But we'll leave that to her,
Yeah, there's
I
so
really
many amazing people out there now who and that's the thing, that's the beauty. I like that there's so many people that I can pass the baton off to. And it may be that there comes a day where there's a student in New Hampshire that needs help with something. I'm like, I got your girl. You're going to see Billy. Like, she's going to take care of you. And I think that's the thing. It's like we can't serve the entire population. We need a network of people that we can say, hey, I can't do this for you, but I know someone who can. And I love that about dental hygiene. And I love that about social media and where things are going right now with our careers, I think.
Yeah, so and we just have so many different hygienists that are really talented in all the different areas. So for students of today, it's our charge to say, okay, these are the people you need, but let me help get you to the finish line first. So
Yes.
I love what you're doing. So we can get off topic and talk about so many different things that we love about dental hygiene, but I know we're here to talk about finance, which I'm super passionate about as well. And your article just spoke to me when I read it. So if you could share a little bit about that, Dana, and then we'll just let the conversation unfold from there.
Yeah, so I recently wrote an article for Dente Magazine, which is a super cool online magazine. It's a dental hygienist who creates the magazine. He's out of South Africa, which is really really neat. And he just reached out and asked me if I would like to write an article. And I every time he's like, "Hey, would you like to write an article?" I'm like, "Yes, can it be over this?" And it's always something a little bit random. And so this time, lately, personal finance has been really on my mind. It's something that I'm very passionate about, but I didn't know I was passionate about it until after dental hygiene school. So I wrote this whole article about it's called the FIRE movement, which is financial independence, retire early. And if you're new to dental hygiene or if you are on this in the social media space, you'll see that there's a lot of hygienists who mention they're burnt out and they want to change and they're looking to get out of the op. Or they're in pain, something's going on. And those are real realities of our profession. But if you are financially independent and you're striving for that, ideally, I would say before dental hygiene school, because once you get into dental hygiene school, there's usually a stopgap in the earning potential. But especially right when you graduate, if you keep living like a college student, which is what I did, you just sock that money away. When the time comes that you're looking for a shift, a change, maybe you just need to go down to fewer days, or maybe you just want to take a mini retirement. You're like, I'm going to take 6 months off and recharge, refresh. Then I'm going to come back and give yourself space around your career. That is the beauty about financial independence. Now, the retire early portion is completely up to the person who's on this journey, right? Like, I don't really plan to ever retire. My goal is to just be work optional, which means when I get to a certain age, work is optional, but we all know that I'll probably still be out here doing stuff. So it's one of those things, just to have that peace of mind, knowing that you have the finances to back you up to make whatever moves you want in your career. That's really the motivation behind the article.
Yeah. And how did you get onto this path of fire? I love the
Yes.
fire I love that.
Yeah, so whenever I graduated, my husband and I were planning a wedding. We both went back and were working on our masters. And when we got married, we were looking at 80 to $90,000 in debt. And I mean, that was I'm obviously still speechless about it. It
Painful.
was
It's painful, isn't it?
yes, yes. And I through growing up, I always remember my parents being like, you don't really want debt. And they like didn't want me to get a credit card. And they were very much into saving, but there wasn't a whole lot of conversation around it. It wasn't like that was the overarching theme of my childhood was scarcity or saving. I just remember these lessons that I would learn. And I also remember sometimes failing really bad at these lessons. So I would go through these phases where I would save, 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 save. And then I would just spend all of my savings on something stupid. And I did that in high school with my first job. I saved up like $800 and I went and bought a video camera. Like, why? I don't know. I couldn't tell you why. And I spent all my money on this video camera. And I was like, I could have put that in a 40 or a Roth, and like now that $800 could be $8,000. So it, you don't know until you know. And I remember the feeling after I spent all that money and I didn't feel good about it. It was not just buyer's remorse. It was like, there has to be something more that I could do with this money. So, anyways, I feel like those were my early journeys, but the actual kind of spark and the education and personal finance didn't come until after I graduated hygiene school. And really, probably right before my husband and I got married, I really started looking for resources on debt payoff. How do I maximize my wealth? How do I get out of this situation? Because I was very scared. When you are a dental hygienist, or really anytime if you have debt, and I'm not anti-debt at all. I'm just bringing some like shedding some light on the situation. Debt equals risk, right?
Yes.
So, I've had students who start the program, they're not successful, and now they have $20,000 in student loans that they're never going to pay off with the career that they hoped, or hopefully they'll get to go back and try again and finish. But that's a real risk, right? Or if you graduate, you have 30,000 in student loans and then you break your wrist and you can't practice for 6 months, you just have to be very realistic about those issues, the risks that are involved with having debt. And I felt that weight on me a lot, the risk. So I was looking for a plan to pay that off.
Wow. That and what were some of the challenges you faced when you first started getting yourself in that habit of focusing on your debt? Because, paying off debt can have its probably the same amount of accomplishment and reward as buying something. So how did you transfer your focus in that direction?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my personality type is already on track with being like, oh, I've set a goal, I'm going to go for it. And so I feel like the things that really helped were one, setting a goal, like a deadline. This is when we would like to have the debt paid off by. Okay, realistically, having a plan, how much can we contribute towards the debt each month? What sacrifices might we be making? Like, we wouldn't buy paper towels, we wouldn't buy plastic bags like baggies. We would use, like a dishcloth, or we would use a Tupperware instead of a plastic bag. So we made these small changes, which were sustainable and good for the environment too. So we felt very good about that. But making these slow changes, I think the hardest part for me at first was getting the budget in order. Budgeting has changed my life. I know exactly how much money I have. I know exactly where it's going. I know exactly how much I want to put towards something, and I know how much I have to save or to pay off debt, whatever that may be. A lot of people think budgeting is really restrictive, but if you listen to any, podcast about finance, usually they'll tell you actually it's very freeing because you tend to find money that you didn't know existed. Maybe it's money that you're putting to a subscription every month that you forgot about, or maybe it's to Netflix and you're like, man, I haven't watched Netflix in 3 months. I've been watching Hulu, well, maybe I can cancel Netflix and recoup that $30 a month. So you really start to find some of this missing money and you get a little bit more power with your finances with that. But it takes practice to budget because the first time you budget, you're going to under budget or you may over budget. It just depends on the situation. Like most people don't know how much they're spending on gas or groceries each month. And so you put what you think you're going to spend and then when you go over that, you're like, "Whoa, okay, maybe maybe I wasn't so in tune with how much I'm spending anyways." But I think it's just really good. What gets measured gets improved. So if you're following through and you have this desire to improve your finances, as long as you're tracking it, like you will see positive improvements.
Yeah. And creating a budget just builds awareness of
Hmm.
maybe I've gotta not eat out so much this month and because I'm spending this much on groceries, but I'm still going out to eat. Oh my goodness, I'm spending half my money on food in some way, one form or another type of thing.
That is so true. And actually, the biggest waste in terms of money is grocery waste because people usually will, I think, throw away 20 to 30% of their food that they purchase at the grocery store. And I'm not perfect. I mean, I still make these mistakes. I had to throw out some potatoes yesterday and my like budget mindset was like, if I would have just frozen them or chopped them up and cooked them and put them in the fridge, like I wouldn't have had to throw these away. And it's just something to think about, just planning a little bit more for your meals, what you're going to eat. Cooking at home saves so much money. So that's always a great way to start the budget is to just cook more at home.
Yeah, and I love that you pointed out a couple examples of, the paper towels, and like the snack bags and stuff, and really being mindful of the amount of food you're purchasing because all of those things sound so small and maybe insignificant, but man, does it add up over time.
Yes, especially with inflation now. I mean, I know everyone's feeling it. I've been tracking my budget for maybe 9 years now. And I can go back and look and see what groceries cost me then versus what they cost me now. Eating out, everything has gone up. So, I mean, I get it. I get that money can feel tight, but there's still ways that you can make it not so tight. And just those little tiny adjustments, they make a big, big difference.
Yeah. So what have you done in your life to keep you motivated to stay committed to that goal? Because it can be really, I think finances are one of those things where because there's so much coming at us from so many directions, and we sacrifice for a long time while we're in school. So, like, one of the first things I see students do when they get out of school is usually buy a new car or something like that. So, what are some of the things that you can do to keep yourself on track?
Yeah, I feel like I've gone from one extreme to the other. When I first started my debt payoff and when I first started this like personal finance journey, I was very strict on myself, very restrictive. We would still travel. That was definitely something that was important to us. So travel was something we never skimped out on. But there were some things, it was like, oh, like a nice bag of coffee. And when I say nice, I'm talking like a $7 bag over a $5 bag, right? And I'd be like, oh no, 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 we need to get the cheapest thing possible. And I think that there should be room for the things that you love in your budget. And if you don't do that, you can get very, very worn out you can get burnt out on budgeting. I know that I've been there before. So I think you have to give room in your budget for time to enjoy yourself or to do the things that you love. I don't think that you should completely restrict yourself, but you should also be mindful of your other goals, your long-term goals. And the hardest part with personal finance is the patience and the long term. Because now that I'm at a place, 9 years later, I can finally start to see the fruits of my labor. I think the biggest thing is automating. When you get out, just automate money to your savings right away. Automate it to a Roth IRA, or if you have an employer account, a 401k, automate it to that. And you just don't miss it because it was never there. It was kind of hard for me when we were paying off the debt to send all that money to the debt, but I could see it coming down and we were paying less interest every time, So it was like, okay, I could see the end in sight when we were bringing that interest down. But then once we were done, it was really hard to take that money we had been spending on the debt and shift it into the retirement accounts because I suddenly felt rich, right? I was like, oh my gosh, I have all of this extra money. And that first year after we paid off debt, we saved up an emergency fund, like a big emergency fund. But oh my gosh, we went nuts. We traveled so much, which I felt like was really nice. And I'm glad we did because then COVID happened like a year
Yeah.
later. So it all kind of played out. But when COVID happened, we barely had any money to our names. And looking back, I was like, looking through it, I was like, oh my gosh, like, and we would, thankfully, like my husband's job was stable, but I had just left my job to start teaching 2 days. It was like not a situation that you didn't want to have a stockpile of cash. So
Yeah.
I think that, you just live and you learn. And through every experience, I don't know. My thought is if I need money, I can go make money. I'll figure it out. That's kind of my thought process. So
That's so great, Dana. I mean, I just think it's such valuable information for students to know because, you made a really good point. They've never had the money. And
mhm.
it's, what I love about getting someone to the finish line of dental hygiene school is that I know it's going to change their life because it's going
Yes.
to change their income, which increases their opportunities. And what I did, I graduated from dental hygiene school and just like you, I was focused on the debt. And I to this day have never lived off the full potential of my income to this day. And I've just the discipline and the focus of the long term because I'm having a golden birthday this fall, I will say.
I love
And
it.
I have to say, I had goals of, when I turn this age, I want to have this much saved. And it seemed so unattainable. It really did. When I graduated from dental hygiene school, I was 22. And that just seemed like something that I was just kind of saying just to give myself a number or whatever, and then like you start to see it's like a snowball rolling down the hill. Or I know you don't get snow in Texas, but you know what
Not
I'm
often,
saying.
but I know what you mean. Yes, I
Yeah.
do know what you mean.
It's like a snowball, when you first start rolling something down the hill, it takes a little bit to get it moving, but then once it gets going, it almost gets so that you don't have to do any effort. You don't actually have to have that painful process of contribution to actually see it still grow.
Yes.
And that's the fruits of your labor, right? That's the seeds that you plant in that trudging when you're in the ditches with the debt and you're trying to pay that off. That's what I love about what you're talking about. So bringing this to light for students to say, don't live off that income when you get out there. Work on paying off your debt and take some money, and act. I know adulting is kind of
Yes.
a drag sometimes.
You know what though? But right now I'm in what they call the boring middle phase, which is like at the early start of your financial journey, you're just excited, you're paying off the debt, you're seeing these changes occurring. And then you get to the boring middle, which is okay, it's still like all the processes are automated, the money's going to savings every month, it's being invested and it's growing, which is awesome. But it's just kind of like, all right, we're still waiting to get to those long-term goals, like you said. And I always love your stories because it's like you come up with something in your head and you project it down the line and then it's going to happen. And
Yeah.
that's really what we should be doing is the thought you have in your head of what you want to succeed. I think you just have to trust that if you put some planning and action into place that it will happen, right? So, for me, I always like to tell students the story of right when I graduated, I get my first big girl check. I went to Ross. I didn't buy anything crazy, okay? But this is just like a key of thinking through your money and being intentional. I went to Ross and I bought maybe it was Marshall's. Either way, I bought a silverware holder. Like a fancy, it was like bamboo and it had like a little like paper design on the inside. It was like $10, okay? Do I still have I remember that being so excited. I was like, I've got money and this is what I'm going to buy. I don't have it anymore. It didn't fit in my new drawer at my new house. We just donated it. And I'm thinking, that $10, like I didn't need that. I already had a silverware holder. It just wasn't as cute, So I kind of started going through this process of, I mean, I felt like I've gone through this big shift. It was like debt payoff. I went really minimalistic for a while.
Mhm.
And I think all of those things have helped me to just be more intentional with my money and really think through a purchase before I make it. Is this something I want in my house 20 years from now? Like, do I love it that much or will I use it that much? I just bought a $10 zester and that thing is life changing. Okay. Cause I was like zesting with a cheese grater before. So, some things they really do make a difference and improve your life, but you just have to think through those purchases and maybe be willing to hold off and like try not to make those impulse purchases a little bit.
That's such good advice, Dana. I'm buying a zester today for my husband for his birthday. It's on his
Oh
list.
my gosh,
This
get the
morning.
little micro one because you can like you can take garlic and go like that on it and it minces your garlic. It's
Oh,
incredible. I'm like, oh, I've been chopping so tiny for years. And listen, I don't cook that much. My husband's a better cook than me, but when it comes to things outside of dental hygiene that require the use of your hands, buy stuff that makes your life easier outside as well. So like the zester, I don't have to chop and like make those fine tiny cuts. I'm like, it protects my hands. Like
yes.
it's an investment in my hands. So as a hygienist, that's important.
That is important. Words of wisdom by Dana. It's all over. It's everywhere.
I know sometimes it goes off track, but I think through these things because I do have some wrist pain. I've had like thumb pain before, so it's like whatever makes my life easier now, I'll really invest in that.
It all matters. So, two things that kind of pop out in my mind as you talk is commitment, being committed to the process of it, because there are no instant gratifications to it, unfortunately. And what I have noticed that commitment actually, as a side note or an impact of it, because you're so committed to the cause of earning your own and developing your own future, when you get further down the road, you are so much more intentional, and there's a space between, there's no impulse purchases as you go down that path a little further. I know you're in the boring phase right now, but I will say it becomes like an intentional thing. The other thing I think might be a financial killer is comparison.
Yes. Yeah.
Comparison is such a killer of financial independence. So I didn't know if you could speak on that as well.
Yes. We were definitely outliers when we decided to pay off the debt
Mhm.
and not buy a house and not buy new cars, and or if we bought cars we only buy them in cash, and that means waiting longer to buy a car and sometimes driving a junky car that breaks down 3 times and you keep having to get it towed. And you start to realize, like I said, I'm in the boring middle. I'm only starting to realize now during that time life did feel tough. It
Yeah.
was a lot of sacrifice, but I kept the focus. But I was looking at my friends who were buying these beautiful houses and driving these beautiful cars. And I just kept feeling like, man, we are behind. I kept thinking they were ahead, but I don't really know. I don't know
Yeah.
what their finances were and or are. And I kept thinking we're behind, we're behind, we're behind. But now coming through to the other side, at this point, having a substantial amount, or what I consider to be for us and where we started, a substantial amount in our savings. I mean, we started at like a negative 90,000 net worth, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, there's nowhere to go but up,
Yeah, you're
right? In
doing
my
great.
opinion. Yeah. So now, I heard once on a podcast that it was talking about, money scarcity and that mindset. And talks about how maybe with inflation, you're like, oh, groceries are going up, this is going up. But as your savings go up, I'm looking at my retirement accounts, I'm like, I could buy these groceries 1,000 times over. Like I have enough to pay for gas. I mean, for a year, 2 years. Like I have that safety net now. And that, coming out of that and putting the blinders on to the comparison, not buying the car just because we needed it or wanted, or, it's like putting some of that sacrifice first. Now I have so much flexibility with my lifestyle. We went down and we stayed at the coast for a month, and it was like, of course, that was actually cheaper than if we'd taken like a vacation to Mexico or something. So I was like
Yeah.
still thinking through the finances of it. I was like, oh, I can rent this condo for, $1,500 and stay there all month, or I can go to Mexico and spend $3,000. Like, huh. And so, I'm thinking through stuff like that. But now I have that little bit of freedom, that little bit of flexibility. And that helped me to step away from certain jobs. So when I had paid off the student loan debt, it was me and my husband. I definitely have to give like a lot of credit to him as well. He kept me sane on this journey. But when we paid that off, it was like, okay, a breath of fresh air. Now I could go into teaching, which is less money, but it wasn't a problem. I didn't need more money. I didn't have expenses that required more money because I had paid all of that debt off. And again, I'm not an anti-debt person. I think that there are times when debt is a useful resource. If you're buying a house, it's like absolutely. And I don't even 100% condone student loan debt because it's an investment in you and in your future.
Absolutely.
Again, we just have to think through the risks, the benefits, and then make a plan for how you're going to tackle that when you graduate.
Yeah, that's solid advice, Dana. I think what it all brings now, if you can stay committed to it, is the freedom of your time to really
Yes.
figure out, because sometimes what we're passionate about doesn't really align with finances, right? It's, I just have to, say that sometimes if you're doing something just because of the money, because you have to, it's a terrible feeling. It's
Hmm.
not a way to live. And we all want to have, we only have this one life. So if you can set yourself up in a way that you have that financial independence so that you can make those choices to do whatever it is that lights you up with your time, that's just a win-win.
Yes. And I get it. I mean, when I graduated, staring down the barrel of all that debt, I had to go after the clinical money. I needed the clinical money to tackle that situation. And if, I'm a big journaler, I really just get all my thoughts out on paper. It just helps keep me sane. But if you go back and read my journals of probably the last year at that clinical job that I was really unhappy at, I really wanted to be teaching. I was just having bad experience after bad experience in this job, but all of my journals were like, I just have to hang on until we pay off the debt. I just have to hang on until we pay off the debt. And it's like, oh, I didn't need to hang on there. I could have gone anywhere else and probably been happier. But in my mind, it was like I needed that paycheck, that amount of money to handle this situation. And I was actually being underpaid for a hygienist, but it is what it is now. I know a lot more now. I mean, there's so much to educate yourself on in terms of finance, but I think that the plan can be simple too. For me, it was pay off the debt, save up an emergency fund, start contributing towards retirement. For the retirement, I don't get fancy. I look for something that's low fee, and then I just make sure that the money goes in there every month. I have a fee-based financial planner. I don't, he does not get a cut of my money. He only gets money when I call him and I want an appointment with him. And that's my process. Like it's all automated. I set it up. It took learning to figure that out. I got help from people. I listened to a lot of financial podcasts, but that's the simplistics of it. And then it's like, okay, now what are your other goals? Save for a house, save for a car, save for a vacation. And then I just put the money into there every month. But the starting point is the budget and living on less than you earn, right? And if you can learn that early on and you just keep living like a college student, you'll realize you'll have everything you need. We already have everything we need, right? It's like if you have a roof over your head and food in your fridge and toilet paper, we all know that's an essential, clothes, like those are your essentials. And I think that we can take those for granted so easily, kind of going back to the comparison thing, seeing what other people have. But if you just take a moment to really be thankful for what you have, and sometimes I saw this practice once, it was just ask yourself, man, how did I get here? Like, I'm a hygienist. I live in this apartment, it's got these beautiful high ceilings. Like, yeah, a house would be great, but I have a new bed that I was finally able to buy, outright. And I love that bed. It's like, take a moment and think about where you are now, and that will change and it will get better in the future. But we can't just put off the happiness when that moment comes. I am all over the place today, Billy. Thank you for just like going on this journey with me. I think it's all the things I ever wanted to say are just pouring out of me today.
It's one of the things I love about you, Dana. I mean, you can really talk to students about almost any topic. And all of this is really good for them, because I think one of the biggest challenges is taking the first step, right? We can set a
Yes.
goal for ourselves, but can we have it within ourselves to not listen to others or our own voice in our head that might be negatively speaking to us, like you don't know anything about finance, or you don't know how to save, or you don't know what you're doing, or whatever it's saying, and just take that first step. So
Yes.
for me, when I graduated, I did the same thing. I had some debt to pay off and I was just laser focused on the debt. And then I built up an emergency fund. And then we had a good friend who referred us to a finance guy because we didn't have podcasts and all of that way to find out that information. And we ended up calling him Uncle Owen because he was like an uncle to me. I called him all the time, and they get like commission off what they make you. So if they make you more money, they earn more money or whatever. But I remember going to the place, I was sweating. It was probably like how some people feel when they go to the dentist, I was sweating. We went in and he opened up all these different accounts that we needed and took all of our money from our emergency fund. And we left there and my husband was like, I feel like I'm going to throw up, because we had just taken, I think it was like $5,000. I think we had just taken all of the money that we saved. We felt like we had saved and spent it, but we didn't really spend it. We just opened up a bunch of different accounts to create that automation, but it
Yes.
still felt very scary. It felt very scary to do and very risky. I don't know why. I think the only other time I've ever felt like that was the day I said my wedding vows and the day that we signed our papers on our house, so like those big moments. So if what you and I are talking about gives students the confidence to just take action on that first step, then you and I could talk about anything and get off the rails as long as they feel like I can make a budget and I can invest in my future, then I'm happy. And I know you will be too.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I look at my life and I think through all the things that felt so hard, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, where they're at now. There's always a new element of surprise, something that you have to learn and grow through. And, now it's like, okay, I'm 36 years old and we're just now buying our first house. I mean, this has been a long time coming for me. For a long time, I felt like, are we ever going to be able to get a house? Are we ever going to be able to get a house? And it's like those goals, they come. You just have to trust that they will come. And then you just have to be patient. That's been the biggest learning experience for me with my money, is knowing that, sure, it would be lovely to win $1 million.
Yeah,
And in my head, I'm like, I already know what I would do with it. It's like this much would go here, this much would go here. We'd pay off the house, and I'd put a lot of it in investments. I'd give this much away. Like I already have a plan for that $1 million if it magically makes its way to
right.
me. But in the meantime, I'm not going to sit by and wait for that to happen. None of us sat by and waited for our hygiene career to just fall in our laps. We knew what we wanted and we went out there and we got it, right? It's
Yeah.
like it's fun to have that mentality for your life and to sit back now when I check my net worth and it goes up and I see my investments, making money that it's just sitting there. It's coming to me, I'm like,
Yes.
whoa, this is so much fun. Yeah. And I didn't see that for so long, and now that I'm in the boring middle, I can really, really appreciate where I started and how scary that felt. And to be at a point of financial security now. I'm not independent yet. I couldn't walk away from a job, but I'm stable at this point. And I just, I don't know, that empowering feeling, and to be like, oh yeah, I can buy this, or oh yeah, I can buy that, or to just give, like the
Mm.
scholarship I'm doing right now with Freshies Co. It's like, yeah, why not? Let's give a scholarship. We've got the money. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So there's so much positive, but you have to be patient. And that's the hardest part. It really is. But if you set it up and let it do the work, it will happen.
Yeah, I love that, and it's so true. I do think that it shifts the way you look at the world.
It does.
when you've become a little bit stable, with your finances. But I do think that there's a difference between watching it grow and being patient and then having, having a windfall of $1 million, like you say, just fall in your lap. But somebody who's been intentional their whole saving career, if they were given $1 million, they would do exactly what you're saying, divide it here, 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 and here. And because you've already learned the tools on how to be fiscally responsible. And I just love that. I want that for every single student, every single dental hygiene student that graduates, because you pointed out some really great things about pain and limiting, challenges for some, and we don't always see that coming. So, if you run into a challenge like that and you've set yourself up the way that you've said, Dana, it's a different story than the one where you've been, maybe not being as fiscally responsible, and all of a sudden you break your wrist or you have an injury, or, you're in pain and you just can't do clinical because some of the other options just don't have the financial backing, right? But you can still make a living. It's just being responsible with that income when it's there is so essential. I love all that you
Yeah.
shared. Thank you so much, Dana.
Yeah. I think the last thing, I would just wrap up with is saying, you mentioned that freedom that you have when you start to have that financial stability. And what that financial stability gives you is the ability to care for yourself and your family. And, for me, I think through if I was still in the same situation that I was, 5 years ago, I would still be working myself to death. I would still be, coming home in pain, not very happy, feeling burnt out, which took me several years to recover from burnout. And then I went and I worked in education, which is a whole nother ball game, a whole nother different type of stress, but I was happy. I would call it positive stress.
Y-
But, when this moment came to shift and pivot in my career and go to the entrepreneur side and to work 1 day a week as a public health hygienist, making $32 an hour as a public health hygienist, right? Like I'm not becoming a millionaire off of that money. My husband's like, you basically volunteer there. Like, yes, because by the time I drive to the different schools and that, but it's enough for me and I love it. And having that freedom and flexibility to choose my passions now, the entrepreneur thing, it's growing. And every day I feel like it grows a little bit more, which is amazing. But I don't have to stress that much because this I have this plan in place that's there to protect me and to help with our finances. And it's like we don't need to earn as much as we think we do once we've fixed some of these maybe little issues that are contributing towards maybe the finances not being exactly where you want them to be. And I just think that if all people knew, hey, if I get this right, I can do anything that I want to do. And, if you stay passionate about your career as a hygienist, you'll probably find that you have a niche, that there's something about dental hygiene that you love so much. For us, it's education. Some people love to educate on, oral cancer screening, like Susan Cotton.
Yeah.
Some people like Anne Rice, they love to teach about dementia. And so there's so many super cool things that you can do and find your niche in dental hygiene. And then if you want to step out, or if you want to work in the 1 day a week, 2 days a week, kind of like me, and then you go out and you do these other things on your other days, like the opportunities are seriously endless. And if you have that financial security behind you, suddenly the leap isn't so scary. You don't rely on anything, right? So that's really my goal, is to help students get to that point, or, hygienists to get to that point, to have the freedom to just choose, right? Like there's power in choosing what you want to do.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that is so well said, Dana. So if every student that graduates could at least start a budget and take an action step moving forward. Um, and I do think that doing those two things helps you realize that it's possible. Then
Yes.
then we're the change makers that we've set out to be.
I know. My top two tips: start a budget and invest in a Roth IRA. If you're, some people, if they, maybe if you have spousal income, or if you're making a lot of money, you may not be eligible to contribute to the Roth IRA, but most people can. And your money grows tax free in a Roth IRA, and you can contribute a certain amount every year. Right now in 2024, I believe it's $7,000. So $7,000 that you put aside, let's say you're making 70,000, right? In the grand scheme of your month to month, that's not that much money. and it grows tax-free as long as you invest it in really good low cost, index funds or whatever it is that you want to put it in. I don't recommend individual stocks for simply the risk, but listen, if you do your research and you're choosing the right thing, and again, there's people out there that can help you with it, but those are my top two: budget and Roth IRA for new grads. It's like, just do a compounding calculator, right? Like, go put in
Yes.
what 7,000 will be in 20 years, and
Yes.
you're just going to be mind blown. You're going to be mind blown. So, and if you need help with that, you can always reach out to me. I'll be happy to give you my favorite resources on anything personal finance.
Yeah, Dana, that's such good advice because the Roth, you pay the taxes on the money before you put it in. And we don't know what the future holds. Look at what inflation's done over these last few years. We don't know what the tax brackets or what your taxable income will be 20, 30 years from now. And you won't have to worry about that if you're investing in a Roth because you're doing it now. So when you take it out, that money is tax free. It's so good.
Yes. Yep. You just once you get to retirement age, there's rules. There's rules to all of these retirement accounts, but just play within the rules. Put the money in there, and you can't touch it until you're a certain age because there's penalties if you take it out before. So it's like, just let it ride, let it grow, and then just see yourself become more independent day by day.
Yeah, that's good advice. Well, I think that's a really good place to end, Dana. Thank you
Yes.
so much for all of your words of wisdom.
Of course. Thanks, Billy. I appreciate you having me on.
Aw.